Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Today's review is 2006's Terror in Talabheim, an adventure in the Eye of the Forest for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, 2nd edition by Black Industries. Okay, first a bit of history. Terror in Talabheim is a 96-page hardback that serves as both a sourcebook for the city of Talabheim and a campaign involving the city that was released as part of Black Industries' now defunct Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition line. Okay, to the cover. Here we have, on the face of it, a well done cover by Paul Jaycock depicting, well, I'm not so sure at this point. Okay, on to the inside. We have a short introduction that tells us what to expect. The book is divided into two sections, The Eye of the Forest, which details the history of Talabheim, and Terror in Talabheim, which is a campaign set there. First up is the city of Talabheim. Here we are treated to the history of the Eye of the Forest. Named so as the city and its surrounding area sit in a colossal crater that is several miles wide, said to have been created when Tal defeated a gigantic worm by flinging it high into the air and watching its fiery corpse plummet to the ground. The worm's flesh infused the land, making it incredibly fertile. Tal, pleased with his victory, called it Talabheim, or Tal's Victory, and proclaimed that in time his faithful would make the land their own and bored a tunnel through it to allow his people access. In time, the Talabek descendants of the Talutan tribe found the crater, and Kruger, chief of the Talabek, ordered his people to venture within and create a great city to honour Tal, although this was not realised in Kruger's lifetime. In IC 40, Kruger's son Talgris founded the city. It had the name Talheim for centuries, but ultimately came to be known as Talabheim. Sigmar, on his final journey to the east, is known to have passed through Talabheim. Looking down upon the city, he proclaimed that it would never fall as long as it remained true to Tal. Although he only remained in the city for one day, he left his mark. He dined with Talgris, who asked him to stay a while longer, and Sigmar gifted him his white stallion. Around 20 years later, the new religion of Sigmar blossomed within the empire, and although a temple was raised in Talabheim, the peoples remained faithful to Tal. As time went by, those that followed Ulrich and Tal began seeing the burgeoning cult of Sigmar as a threat to their way of life, and matters only worsened when in IC 1359, the Grand Duke of Strickland, a puppet for the cult of Sigmar, was crowned emperor. The Grand Duchess Attilia of Talabekland refused to recognise the title, and the Elector Count of Stirland imposed a series of taxes on the cult of Ulrich. In IC 1360, Attilia crowned herself empress and banned the cult of Sigmar from Talabekland. Now a political tool, religion had become central to the wars of the empire. The cult of Ulrich, supported by worshippers of Tal, took up arms against Sigmarites, and the squabbling lasted for around 200 years, with one emperor being in Talabekland and one in Stirland. In IC 1547, Grand Duke Heinrich of Middenland sought to legally become emperor, but was soundly rejected by the Attilian emperor Frederick V of Talabheim. Heinrich, upon returning to Middenheim, pronounced himself emperor anyway and declared war on Talabekland, and in IC 1550 also declared war on the self-proclaimed Emperor of Null. In IC 1557, Middenheim sent an army to destroy Talabheim, but the huge crater wall was never breached, although the port of Talagad was razed and occupied. Talabheim lay under siege for almost 20 years, but as it had a verdant interior, the city was easily able to support itself almost indefinitely. These wars resulted in the complex series of laws that remain in the city to this day. In IC 1750, the Emperor of Talabekland, Horst the Cautious, was asked to help repel an invading army that approached Talabheim, but refused to send troops. The city revolted and seceded from the throne entirely, crowning its own emperor, Helmut II. Due to Talabheim's unbreachable walls, Horst could do little about it, and this estrangement continued for a few hundred years, until Emperor Magnus of Null acceded to their unification in IC 2304. In IC 2302, following the city ignoring Kislev's call for aid, chaos cults began to surface in Talabheim, but were unearthed and wiped out. As Prague fell to chaos, Magnus of Null turned to Talabheim for aid, and upon arriving at Talabheim, it is said that Tal showed his approval with the call of wolves and a stag with a hammer mark on its forehead appearing. Talabheim mobilised troops and marched against chaos. The skilled trackers of Talabheim proved invaluable to the combined armies defeating chaos. After the war in IC 2304, Magnus was declared emperor, and Talabheim surrendered their crown, and the Attilian emperor line came to an end. During the Storm of Chaos, the city played a relatively small role, with less than half of its military left behind to guard the Tal Bastion. Archaon's forces never reached Talabheim, but cult and mutant activity put the city on alert, and Talgad was an instrumental military supply point that needed protecting from saboteurs. In recent history, the Elector Count of Talabekland has vanished, and the Countess Krieglitz Untern has taken control. The next section deals with the various powers of Talabheim. It gives information on the missing Elector Count, Halmut Feuerbach, and the Krieglitz Untern family that are currently in control. It details the Parliament and the Hunters' Council, who are in charge of the militia and city watch. It gives a small mention of the Standing Army and the Tal Bastion Guard, and the Tunnel Brigade, or the Terriers as they are known. It discusses the militia, or drunken gang, and the city watch, who are known as dog faces due to the particularly poor wolf heraldry that they wear. It then details the various knightly orders that have a presence in Talabheim: the Knight of the White Wolf, who are dedicated to Ulrich, the Knights Panther, and the relatively new order, the Knights of the Stag. It talks about Tal's Chosen, a group of elite woodsmen that patrol the interior of the Tal Baston, and gives us a new career, the Horned Hunter. It gives mention of the various priesthoods that hold power in the city, and discusses how the wizards of the city, more specifically the Jade Order, work closely with the priesthood of Tal. Also included are the Boatmen's League and the Judges. Talabheim is known as a city with a multitude of laws, and a consequence of laws in Talabheim is taxes, some of them bizarre. These range from a levy that looks after orphans, to a special tax on halfling shipments from the moot, to tax on entertainers that wear hats. As a result of these taxation rules, we have a new career, the Exciseman. Next up is the city itself. The city is surrounded by the massive crater rim known as the Tal Baston, and has watch posts along its perimeter. The only legal way to enter Talabheim is via the Wizard's Way, a long winding path that rises up to 200 feet up the side of the crater wall. The city's first line of defence is the High Watch, a series of 4 black iron portcullises, and this is occupied at all times. We then have a rather small map of Talabheim and the surrounds, which labels all places of interest. We have the rules and regulations for passing through the Tal Baston, and next is the Law Quarter. It details the Grand Courthouse of Edicts, the Hollows, Talabheim's prisons, and the Temple of Arena, the only temple not part of God's Row other than the Grove of Tal. We have the Obelisk of Laws, a massive black marble spire that is covered in posters for new laws and old, and then the Freeman's Court. The dwarf residence of Stonehome is detailed, and we have another new class, the Litigant. The Tallows follow this, a rat-infested slum where the city's poor live, and the Holler's Corner, a place to find cheap labour, named so for the cacophony of criers. The Black Lantern is a famous inn from the city which is notorious for thugs and conmen, and we have the Fisherman's Alley and the Shields, a group who offer protection and guidance in the city, who have a reputation for being ruthless and stalwart. The rat holes are next. These are the tunnels and caves in the Tal Baston cliff face that are sometimes used by businesses such as tanneries and dye works, but it also has a nest of disease and mutants within its depths. Following this is the Merchant District. Here we have the Three Apples Inn and the Merchant's Guild, followed by Snorri's Pawn Shop and the Office of the Purse. We then have the City of Gods, or the Temple District. God's Row is reached by a wide footpath called the Reliquary Road. We have the Shallian Sanatorium, which is constructed of white marble and seems to glow in the sun, where the rich and poor are catered for. We then have a new career, the Knight of the Verdant Field, an order of Templars who are dedicated to the protection of Talabheim and devoted to Myrmidia. We have a shrine to Manan and a Temple of Mor, which is laid out like a cemetery. There's a temple to Myrmidia and the Temple of Shallia, which adjoins the sanatorium, and a Temple of Sigmar. The largest temple is dedicated, unsurprisingly, to Tal, and to a lesser extent Rhea, and there's also a temple to Ulrich. In the northwest corner of the Temple District is the Taliban Asylum, which is established in 2304 after the Great War against Chaos. Following this is the Talgarten. This is a large, magnificent district that is home to manors, gardens and parks. It contains the Sea of Roses, a conservatory that was established almost 500 years ago, which is known not only for its roses, but also for its exotic plants from around the world. And we have the Brothers' Lodge, a sweat lodge dedicated to Tal, where some forms of alcohol are consumed tax-free. Next is the Null of Doctrines, a place where religious zealots exhort passers-by. We have the Schwartz-Hold Norgate, which is a high concentration of warehouses, craftsmen and blacksmiths, and its local inn, the Rusty Musket. There is the Wernhauer Stables that provide some of the finest horses in Talabheim, and Yvandir's Blacksmithing, a rare elf blacksmith who produces exquisite rapiers and longswords. Also here is the Red Check Theatre, where one can experience lowbrow comedy, and Tal's Fountain, an enormous statue of Tal that is a fountain that never freezes in the winter and is considered a lucky place. Following this is the Manor District, a sprawling neighbourhood on the eastern side of the city that spreads into the fields of the crater. Here we have the Grand Manor where the Countess lives and the Royal Academy of Talabheim, a university that is considered second-rate when compared to the older institutes of the Old World. There is the Avenue of Heroes, so called because it contains dozens of statues of Talabheim and the Empire's greatest, and there is the Quill, an exotic restaurant that hosts poetry readings. On the fringes of the Manor District is the Darkroom Downs, where dogs are raced and knights joust, and there is the Guild Row, a place where skilled labourers live and work. There is also Hargrenson's Brewery, the establishment of a dwarf called Belloc Hargrenson, possibly the finest brewer in Talabheim. There's Amelia's Waxworks, a fine chandler, and to the southwest is the Geltwald, or the Gold Forest, a quarter rife with goldsmiths, pawn shops and moneylenders. Here we have One Man's Treasure, a large and successful pawn shop, and the Faithful Lender, a moneylending establishment run by the halfling Nobler Crumbuckle. In the far east corner is the Earthworks, a semi-rural district that's home to many agricultural families. Here is the community of Eaststadt, a commune where, unknown to the authorities, a group of mutants dedicated to Tzinch live, and the Pig's Ear Tavern. Other places of interest in the Tal Baston are the Road and Garden of Mor, which as you would expect is where the dead of the city go, and the South Quarry where the black granite of the crater walls is mined. We also have the Talgrunar Forest, also known as the Talveld. It's a place where priests of Tal perform secret rites, and on the easternmost side of the crater is the Crater Lake and the Crater Marsh. We also have Dankerud, a retreat and spa for the wealthy of Talabheim. Following this we have some simple adventure seeds. Next up is Talgad, a large settlement where the docks are. Here we have the Black and Tooth, a barber shop and dentist, and the Workers' Wall, a place for people seeking work to hang out. There's the Fish Market and the Eel, a tavern away from the eyes of the city guard. There is also a gambling den called Scully's that caters for Talgad's lower classes. It details the Depot District, which is on the south side of the Talabheim, that is home to a series of large warehouses. It contains the Hammer and Tongs, an arms and armours shop, and Griswold and Son, a tailor in monetary ruin. Also detailed is the Market Square and the Ten-Tailed Cat, a tavern run by an ex-pit fighter. We then have the Jakes, a filthy district full of transients and refugees, and the Street of Thieves, a place of punishment in the lawless streets of Talgad. Finally we have Little Kislev, where you can find the Ballylaker, a drinking establishment used by Kislevite men, and Madame Yaga, a fortune teller of some skill. Next up is the campaign set here, Terror in Talabheim, so if you intend to play this, stop reading now. It doesn't actually mention, at least that I could find, how many players this is for, but there are 4 pre-generated characters, so it would probably be safe to assume it's for 4 to 6 characters. We're given a basic synopsis of the adventure which talks about the underground highway built by the dwarves, Ungridankor, or the Underway. Large portions of it are destroyed, and the Skaven use parts of it to assault the world above ground. The Skaven have bided their time, and in the aftermath of the Storm of Chaos, some among them believe that their time has come. A plague priest of Clan Pestilence, Nelric the Suppurator, has targeted Talabheim with a particularly virulent plague. This particular plague was designed to slowly gestate, with the aim being that it spread throughout the population of the Empire before it was discovered. Talabheim was chosen due to its central position on both the Old Dwarf Road and the Talabheim River. Nelric, however, has been deceived. His plans are not his, and his disease has been tampered with. A Grey Seer, Asarak Steeleye, has ambitions greater than the growth of plague. He has magically influenced the disease so that its potency can be easily greatly increased or cured with the right substance. Once Talabheim has been infected, Asarak intends to enhance it and kill Nelric and his followers. Asarak has allied himself with the engineers of Clan Skryri. The plan is to make the powers of Talabheim seal off the city to contain the plague, and then Asarak and Clan Skryri will then attack from Ungridankor. He intends, after the city falls, to send messages to the other cities in the hope that they will gather troops around the city to liberate it. Asarak and the Skryri engineers will be working on a hideous weapon, a warpstone-powered thing, that will rain destruction down on those outside the walls. It is Asarak's hope that whatever minuscule forces the Empire can provide will be destroyed, leaving the path open for him to forge an empire out of Talabheim. The players begin in the muddy streets of the Talgad with no way of entering the city itself. Talgad is fit to burst with refugees from the war, and the whispers of a plague have started. The authorities have declared that the refugees have to move on, and they have sent a respected magistrate, Sulland Hohenlohe, to assess the worthiness of petitioners to enter the city. Here we have a rough timeline of events and how they should occur in a perfect world. We have the stats and information on the magistrate, and the characters are assumed to be wanting to enter the city. Upon meeting him, he offers the PCs a job. He's been authorised to pay a group of brave souls to escort a group of refugees to the village of Breitblatt, a small community a few miles into the Great Forest. They are assured that the journey should take no more than a week, and it pays quite well. He sweetens the deal by hinting that he may be able to expedite their entrance to the city. Assuming the players take the magistrate up on his offer, the journey is uneventful initially, but on the second day they happen upon some foppishly dressed but hungry ogres who are wanting one of the refugees for breakfast, and this is followed by a family of Hochlanders being murdered in their sleep. This will require an investigation by the players, and the respect of the refugees is dependent on the outcome of these tests. Also, the grim discovery that one of the refugees has the plague, called the Grey Ague. When the players return to Talabheim, they find the Talgad in a state of chaos. The Grey Ague has taken hold, and the Wizard's Way, the only path into Talabheim, is closed. Packs of giant rats are getting braver, and zealots are burning plague victims in a holy fervour. This culminates in a mob making their way up to the gates of the city and being cut down by cannons. At some point, the players are to be encouraged to visit the Shallians, as one of the party should at this stage have the plague. The Shallians urge the players to speak to a famous scholar, Weidenhoft, about the plague. He's been studying it to try and find a cure. The players will ultimately find him dead, but his notes are intact, and it appears he was onto the fact that it is a disease and a poison. If the party dig deeper, they discover that one of the Shallians is the daughter of a captain of the guard in the city, and they will have to seek an audience with him, and he, upon finding out that Weidenhoft is dead, asks them to seek the apothecary Dorbler in the city, and to find an stallion called Eladio to gain entrance to Talabheim, telling them they must ride the dragon's tongue. The players can easily find Eladio. He's a fishmonger at the docks, and he can lead them under the walls and into the city. The players encounter a group of Clan Pestilence plague monks on their journey, but ultimately should get into the Talbaston. Should the players seek to find another way into the city, they can, but they run the risk of being killed by murderous thugs who betray them. Initially the players should lay low within the city, but eventually should seek to find Dorbler. Oldfast Dorbler is a kindly physician who takes Weidenhoff's notes and promises to start examining them right away. The players will need to stay in the city in order for him to contact them. 3 days after the players arrive in the city, there's a proclamation that everyone within and of able mind and body are to be drafted into the city watch, something the players will find very difficult to avoid. They are put on various duties, including gathering the dead and sewer details. It's on a sewer detail when they come across an injured and fleeing plague monk. If they track back where it came from, they find a group of plague monks that have clearly been murdered with guns. At some stage after this, the players are contacted by Daubler. He has managed to work out why the plague is resisting all attempts to cure it, and has passed his findings over to the Shallians, who can speed up the process of distributing it. He gives the players a potent cure that will also give them resistance to the plague. The next event happens when the players are asleep after a day's city watch duty. One of the party wakes up to noise outside. Upon investigation, they find the streets awash with Skaven, a vermintide. Against an opponent this numerous, fighting would be suicide, and the players face various challenges as they flee. Eventually, they come upon the militia barricades and to relative safety. Great battles rage in the streets, and the aftermath of the vermintide is a city in panic. On the evening of the second day after the Skaven attack, the players come upon a horrific scene. Foul zombies that have been altered to be more terrifying than in the streets attacking the citizens. If the players defeat them, they find an unusual insignia carved onto the zombies, and while battling them, they meet Paul van Solek, the greatest living member of the Augurs of Moor. He gives the players a cryptic clue as to the zombies created before vanishing. The players should then try and investigate who the insignia belongs to. The DM is encouraged to drive the players to the point of madness with the city's red tape, and just at the point of giving up, they should accidentally discover who the insignia belongs to, Dr. Gugula Skell. The evil doctor has a mansion in the city, and upon investigating, the players need to fight an honourable wight, Christoph Baumer. Baumer advises the players that Dr. Skell is a necromancer, and gives them more information on the condition that they destroy him and free him from her servitude. They find out from Baumer that Skell is a pawn of the Skaven, who has made an alliance with Asarak Steeleye, and that the ratmen that hold the Poor Quarter belong to a rival, Nelric the Suppurator. When the players return to the city, they are involved in another running battle, and the Skaven begin their assault in earnest, as Ekmor Sparker, a clan scryry inventor of great power, reveals himself. Sparker is a Skaven of great intellect who wears a machine that means he doesn't need to eat, sleep or breathe. The battle culminates in the players making a stand in the Heldenhammer Temple, and they will need to face all manner of Skaven horrors, including rat ogres, rattling cannons and warp fire throwers. It's at this point that the adventure turns less specific, and it gives rules on how the players can found the resistance and how some things swing in their favour. They manage eventually to find a human who used to be a prisoner of the Skaven, and who speaks fluent Queekish, the Skaven language. This makes the capture and interrogation of Skaven much more effective. It also stats out two of the key targets, Dr. Gugula Skell and Warlock Engineer Ekmorkas Sparker. Eventually, it may dawn upon the players that the enemy of their enemy may be their ally, and they could choose to reach out to Nelric the Suppurator for assistance. With the right kind of bargaining, Nelric can be convinced to abandon that part of the city that he occupies. Chapter 8 is entitled The Heart of the Matter, and it details the final days before the second battle of Talabheim, and how they can sabotage the Grey Seer's warpstone weapon and face him for a final showdown. Asarak Steeleye is a considerable opponent with a lot of power in his hands. It then deals with the aftermath of the occupation of Talabheim and how things eventually return to normal. The final note is that in the heart of the Temple of Mimidia, there is a reverently placed statue of the PCs with a small plaque that reads, "We remember." Following this, we have 4 pre-generated characters, a city map, and details of the Skaven forces. It stats out the various weapons unique to the Skaven, and there are a few pages of Skaven magic. Terror in Talabheim is a nicely produced package that will bring many hours of adventure to players and DMs who are willing to put in the time to make it that way. The first third of the book details the city well, although it doesn't really feel like it's brought to life in a way that other books do in Warhammer. Although it does have the dirt and grit that we associate with the old world, the added dimension of the crazy laws of the city makes it interesting, but not really from a player's perspective. The maps feel a bit, microscopic at times. A full pull-out map would have been a welcome addition, and the art is generally good throughout, but I do feel that an entire book should have been devoted to a city as important as Talabheim. The adventure starts well, and then begins to feel a bit lightly written. At times it's a bit too vague and fluffy about what the players can do next, and at other times it ruthlessly railroads them down a path it wants you to go on. The Skaven being the main villain of the piece is an inspired choice, as most players don't get to face the horrors of what they can do that often. I would recommend, if you can get hold of a copy, reading this, Children of the Horned Rat, as it gives great insight into Skaven psychology as well as detailing every nasty horror you could possibly wish to throw at your unsuspecting players. The end of the adventure feels a bit sudden after what the adventure describes as months of play, and the idea that Talabheim can start rewriting its history and go back to the blinkered empire view of the Skaven not existing after an entire army of them has enslaved and occupied a city like Talabheim seems a bit dumb and lazily written to me. Also notable in their absence are any XP and Fate Point awards, and unusually for Warhammer, no handouts. In conclusion, Terror in Talabheim has the potential to be a blast if you have players that will buy into the course of the adventure. It's ultimately very rewarding as the Skaven are utterly without mercy and deserve none in return. It has some parts that feel like filler, but these aren't enough to spoil your sojourn into the Eye of the Forest. I give it 8 out of 10. If you enjoyed this review, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, don't forget to check out my other reviews. Bud out.